All right, so have you ever looked up at the night sky and thought, man, I wish I was on a different planet right now? Just getting away from it all. Well, you're not alone. We got a ton of research sent in on human missions to Mars. And let me tell you, this stuff is fascinating. It's not just about, strapping yourself to a rocket and blasting off, oh no. We're talking about surviving on a planet that's basically trying to kill you,
Yeah.
dealing with, politicians and facing some pretty wild ethical dilemmas.
Huh.
It's like just the other day, I was trying to keep my basil plant alive, right? And I realized that sending plants to Mars is probably a tiny bit harder than that. So let's dive into this research and see what challenges we're facing to make this whole Martian dream a reality. Okay, first things first, the sheer scale of this whole thing. Mars is really, really far away. We're talking millions of miles. And it's not like hopping on a plane. It takes like 6 to 8 months just to get there with current technology. And you know what that means? It's a huge commitment. Think about being stuck in a spaceship for the better part of a year. It'd be like that time I got stuck on a delayed flight for like 8 hours, but times 1,000. The boredom, the cramped space, the recycled air. Ugh. And I thought that flight was rough. But it's not just the travel time, right? It's what you have to take with you. We humans, we need oxygen, food, water, and not just for a weekend getaway. We're talking about years, maybe even decades. And hauling all that stuff across millions of miles, yeah, those rockets better have some serious cargo space. And that brings me to another point. Survival. Mars is not exactly a welcoming host. The atmosphere is thin, the radiation is intense, and the temperatures. Let's just say you'll need more than a light jacket. It's like, remember that time I went camping in the desert and forgot my sleeping bag? Yeah, it was freezing, the wind was howling, and I was pretty sure a coyote was going to eat my face. Well, Mars is kind of like that, but on steroids and with way less oxygen. So surviving on Mars means creating our own little bubbles of Earth-like comfort. We're talking sealed habitats that can protect us from the elements, filter the air, and recycle water. We can't exactly pop down to the Martian supermarket, right? We got to be totally self-sufficient. And speaking of supplies, let's talk about food. Remember that basil plant I mentioned? Well, forget about growing anything on Mars without some serious ingenuity. The soil is basically Martian dust, lacking all the good stuff plants need. So we're talking hydroponics, aeroponics, all sorts of fancy space-age farming techniques. And even then, it's a gamble. I mean, I can barely keep a houseplant alive, and those things have actual sunlight. Imagine trying to coax a tomato plant out of Martian dirt. Talk about pressure.
Okay, so we got the journey, the habitat, the food, but what about getting around on Mars? I mean, it's a whole planet, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna need more than just our space legs. Enter the Mars rover. You know, those little robotic explorers that have been scooting around up there for years? Well, they're more than just cute science projects. There are eyes and ears on Mars, mapping the terrain, collecting data, and basically scouting things out for us humans. And they're pretty impressive. Think about it. They're driving themselves around, drilling into rocks, taking pictures, all while being controlled by, nerds back on Earth.
It's like something out of a sci-fi movie. And they're paving the way for us to follow in their tire tracks one day. But even with rovers, Mars is a big place. And let's be real, 6 to 8 months in a spaceship, that's a long time. So scientists are working on ways to speed things up. Enter advanced propulsion systems. We're talking nuclear thermal propulsion, ion propulsion, even solar sails. It's like, remember that time I tried to upgrade my internet speed and ended up with 1,000,000 cables and a technician who spoke a different language? Yeah, it was a mess. But imagine the opposite. Instead of slow internet, we're zipping across the solar system in a fraction of the time. Now that's an upgrade I can get behind. And faster travel times aren't just about convenience. It's about reducing the risks for astronauts. Less time in space means less exposure to radiation, less psychological strain, and less chance of space madness. Speaking of astronauts, let's talk about the human factor. Who are these brave souls who are going to be our first Martian pioneers? And how do we even choose them? It's not like applying for a job at the local coffee shop. This is a gig that requires nerves of steel, a thirst for adventure, and a stomach that can handle freeze-dried ice cream. It's like Remember that time I tried out for the school play and totally froze on stage? Yeah, not my finest moment. But imagine the pressure of being chosen to represent humanity on another planet. Talk about stage fright. So, astronaut selection is a rigorous process. We're talking physical fitness, mental resilience, scientific expertise, and the ability to work as a team. Because in space, teamwork isn't just a nice to have, it's a matter of life and death. And let's not forget the psychological impact. Imagine being millions of miles from home, confined to a small space with the same people for years. It's like being stuck in a never-ending family road trip, but with way more existential dread. So astronauts need to be able to handle stress, isolation, and the occasional bout of space cabin fever. They need to be problem solvers, quick thinkers, and above all, good roommates. Because when you're living on Mars, there's no escaping those awkward silences. Okay, but even with the perfect crew and the perfect spaceship, the perfect playlist for that long journey, there's still the question of what happens when we actually get to Mars. I mean, Mars isn't exactly going to roll out the welcome map for us, right? We've got to make it habitable. And that's where things get really interesting. We talked about habitats, those self-contained bubbles of Earth-like comfort. But building those on Mars, it's not just a matter of slapping together some prefab panels. Oh, no. We're talking about creating structures that can withstand some pretty intense conditions. I mean, dust storms that can engulf the entire planet, radiation levels that would make a banana glow in the dark, and temperatures that swing from, like, scorching hot to freezing cold in a Martian minute. It's like, I remember that time I tried to build a sandcastle on vacation. The wind kept knocking it over, the tide kept coming in, and it ended up looking more like a pile of wet sand than a majestic fortress. Well, building on Mars is kind of like that, but a million times harder and with way less room for error. So we're talking about using some really innovative materials, stuff that can really withstand the extremes. And then there's the whole issue of energy. We need to power those habitats, the life support systems, the rovers, the whole shebang. Solar panels are great, but Mars doesn't get quite as much sunlight as, say, California. So we might be talking about nuclear power. Yeah, I know it sounds a little scary, but in the context of Mars, it might be the most reliable option we have. It's like, those glow-in-the-dark stickers I had as a kid, that they were powered by something called tritium, which is like a radioactive isotope. It wasn't enough to power a city or anything, but it was enough to make those stickers glow for years. So if tritium can power a sticker, maybe nuclear power can power a Martian colony, right? Okay, so we got shelter, energy. What about the air we breathe? Mars has an atmosphere, technically, but it's mostly carbon dioxide, which isn't exactly what our human lungs are looking for. So we need to find a way to create breathable air, oxygen. And scientists are working on that using a variety of methods. One idea is to extract oxygen from the Martian atmosphere. It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But it's totally doable. Those air fresheners that you play into your car's cigarette lighter? They take in the air, do some fancy stuff, and poof, fresh scent. Well, imagine an air freshener that takes in Martian air and poof, oxygen. Okay, maybe not that simple, but you get the idea. Another approach is to use plants. Those green machines that we're going to have to figure out how to grow in the first place. But as we know, plants take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. It's like that time I tried to make a terrarium in a jar. I put in some plants, dirt, water, and then promptly forgot about it. But when I finally remembered and opened the jar, it was like a little jungle in there. The plants had thrived, creating their own little ecosystem. So maybe, just maybe, plants could do the same for us on Mars, turning that thin CO2-filled atmosphere into something we can actually breathe. Right, air, check. Now what about water? Well, it turns out Mars has water, but it's mostly frozen beneath the surface. So we got to dig it up, melt it, and purify it. Kind of like when I was a kid and I'd make snow cones with snow for the backyard. My parents would totally freak out about germs and stuff. Well, Martian water's a bit like that backyard snow, but with 1,000,000 times more potential for, contamination. So we need to be super careful about purifying it, making sure it's safe to drink, to cook with, and of course to water those precious Martian plants. Speaking of plants, let's get back to that challenge for a sec. Because growing food on Mars is more than just a culinary adventure. It's about survival. It's about creating a closed-loop system where we can sustain ourselves without constantly relying on shipments from Earth. It's like that time I tried to bake my own bread. I had this whole vision of being like a rustic artisan baker, but the reality was a lot more chaotic. The dough wouldn't rise, the oven temperature was all over the place, and the final product was more like a brick than a loaf of bread. But I learned something valuable, the importance of self-sufficiency. And on Mars, that lesson is amplified a million times over. So we're talking about using every trick in the book, right? Hydroponics, aeroponics, even genetic engineering. Anything to get those Martian plants to give us the food we need. It's not just about surviving, it's about thriving. It's about creating a new home for humanity, a place where we can grow and evolve, and maybe even bake some decent Martian bread. But let's be real for a sec. Building a new civilization on another planet, it's not going to be easy. There are going to be challenges, setbacks, moments where we just want to give up and order a pizza. But that's where the human spirit comes in. Our ability to overcome obstacles, to innovate, to adapt. That's what's going to get us to Mars and beyond. It's like that time I got lost in the woods. I was totally unprepared. I had no idea where I was going. And I was pretty sure a bear was going to eat me. But I kept going. I used my wits. And eventually I found my way back. And you know what? It was scary. It was challenging, but it was also exhilarating. And that's kind of what going to Mars is all about. Pushing ourselves to the limit, facing the unknown, and proving that humanity can achieve the impossible. So yeah, Mars is a tough cookie, but we humans, we're tougher.
And with a little ingenuity, a lot of determination, and maybe a few extra packs of freeze-dried ice cream, we might just make that Martian dream a reality. All right, so we've talked about the how of getting to Mars, the rockets, the habitats, the Martian gardening techniques. But let's zoom out for a sec and talk about the why. Why are we so obsessed with this red planet? I mean, there are other planets out there, right? Venus, Jupiter, those cool moons around Saturn. What is it about Mars that has us so captivated?
Well, for one thing, it's relatively close, cosmically speaking. It's not like we're talking about traveling to another galaxy or anything. Mars is like our next door neighbor. And in the grand scheme of space travel, that's a pretty convenient commute. Plus, it's a terrestrial planet, which means it has a solid surface. No swirling gas giants or, scorching hot lava planets for us. Thank you very much. We humans, we like to have something solid to stand on. It's in our nature. It's like, remember that time we went to that fancy restaurant and they served everything in these like weird gravity-defying sculptures? It looked cool, but it was impossible to eat. I just wanted a plate, something solid and reliable. And Mars, well, Mars is kind of like that solid plate in the cosmic buffet. It's familiar, it's inviting, and it's got a lot of potential. And speaking of potential, let's talk about the possibility of life. Yeah, I know, we haven't found any little green men running around just yet, but scientists believe that Mars may have once been a much more habitable place than it is today. They found evidence of ancient rivers, lake beds, even organic molecules, the building blocks of life. It's like finding an old photo album, faded pictures of a younger, more vibrant Mars, hinting at a past that was teeming with possibilities. And who knows, maybe there's still some Martian microbes hiding out somewhere, just waiting for us to come say hi. It'd be pretty arrogant of us to assume we're the only ones in this vast universe, right? It's like, remember that time I thought I was the only one who loved that really obscure indie band? And then I went to their concert, and it was packed. It was a humbling experience. And discovering life on Mars, well, that would be the ultimate humbling experience. It would change everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos. But even if we don't find any actual Martians, just exploring Mars can teach us so much about our own planet. By studying its geology, its atmosphere, its history, we can gain a deeper understanding of how Earth formed and evolved. It's like looking in a mirror, but instead of seeing our reflection, we're seeing our planetary twin. And in its differences, we can discover new truths about ourselves. And beyond the scientific discoveries, there's something, uh, something inherently human about exploring the unknown. It's in our DNA to push boundaries, to seek new horizons, to boldly go where no one has gone before. It's what makes us, well, us. It's like, remember that time I decided to try that crazy new fusion restaurant, the one that combined like Mexican and Japanese food? Everyone thought I was nuts, but I had to try it. I had to see what would happen when those flavors collided. And you know what? It was amazing. It was a culinary revelation. And it's kind of what exploring Mars is like, right? It's about taking risks, pushing the limits of our knowledge, and discovering something truly new and extraordinary. But exploring Mars isn't just about satisfying our curiosity. It's also about ensuring the long-term survival of humanity. Earth, for all its beauty and wonder, is a finite resource. We're facing climate change, resource depletion, all sorts of challenges that, threaten our very existence. And establishing a presence on Mars, well, it's like having an insurance policy, right? A backup plan in case things go really south here on Earth. It's like, remember that time I backed up all my files on an external hard drive and then my computer crashed? Yeah, it was a pain, but I was so grateful I had that backup. And having a backup planet, well, that's not a bad idea either. But okay, let's address the elephant in the room here. This whole Mars thing, it's not exactly cheap. We're talking billions, maybe even trillions of dollars. And some people might say, hey, we've got problems here on Earth. Why are we spending all this money on space travel? And you know what? They've got a point. There are some very real, very pressing issues here at home that need our attention. But here's the thing. Investing in space exploration isn't just about escaping Earth. It's about improving life on Earth. The technologies we develop for space travel, the research we conduct, the knowledge we gain, it all has a ripple effect. It leads to advancements in medicine, energy, material science, all sorts of fields that benefit all of humanity. It's like, remember that time I bought that super fancy coffee maker, the one with all the bells and whistles? Yeah, it was a bit of an extravagance, but it made my morning so much better. And that's kind of what space exploration is like, right? It's an investment in our future, an investment that will pay off for generations to come. So is going to Mars a challenge? Absolutely. Is it expensive? You bet. Is it worth it? Well, in my humble opinion, heck yeah. Because it's not just about reaching another planet. It's about reaching our full potential as a species. It's about pushing the boundaries of what's possible, inspiring new generations of explorers and dreamers, and ensuring that the human story continues, not just here on Earth, but out there among the stars. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this Martian deep dive. I hope you enjoyed the journey, and I hope you're as excited about the future of space exploration as I am. Thanks for listening.